As we're going through these presentations, I'm aware, but you may not be aware, that I'm skimming over this material fairly rapidly, and I'm not able to go into the depths and the details that you really need to know to understand these truths in a way that are going to have a positive impact upon you. I've presented this material before on Ezra 7:9, and I've done it recently in Europe. If you wanted to go through that material, it's available online at the moment. I think it's already been loaded up, but it was done in Europe, and it's been translated into French. So it's in English, and I've got a French translator. And there's around 25 to 30 hours of material just on this subject. So if you just condense that into English, it's about 15 hours. So to give you an idea, it's almost 2.5, 3 times the amount of time that I spent this week looking at this subject. And even then, I didn't go through it exhaustively. So to go through Ezra chapter 7 in a really methodical and systematic fashion, it's somewhere around 20 hours worth of material that you need to listen to. That's just what would get presented. That's not your own studies. So if you're interested in doing that, it's available online, and I think it's at which website is that? Midnight Cry. So it's on the midnightcry.co.uk. I'll put it up on the board afterwards, or someone will do that. And there's other presentations as well. The presentations that Brother Noel Del Rosa did in December last year, they're available as well on the internet. So there's more material than what we're discussing here today. So I was going to say, if you're interested, you should all be interested. It's necessary information. But if you think that you're not understanding things clearly, and I'm not explaining all the details, because I don't have enough time here. It's a long study to go through this material systematically and slowly enough for you to pick it up straight away. I want to read another passage. This is again from Leroy Froome's work, Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, Volume 4 again, but this is page 795. The only way you'll get this material, I don't think it's available online, is on the CD-ROM. If you don't have access to a CD-ROM, speak to somebody who does, get them to cut and paste this section and email it to you. You can do it that way if you don't have access to the CD-ROM. Everybody should have access to either the CD-ROM on their computer or the new app that's available on your phone. Without that, you can't do the research that you need to do. The Lord's been gracious enough to his people, despite all the issues about getting access to materials, that just at the right time, I think it's providential, that just as the midnight cry is about to happen, all the writings of Ellen White and the pioneers and all the historical research information that you need access to is all available on your phones for free. So, there's no excuse why we shouldn't avail ourselves of these things. So I'm just going to read from Leroy Froome's work, Prophetic Faith of Our Fathers, Volume 4, page 795. It's a bit of a lengthy passage, but it's interesting. Pressure from opponents, before I read it, this is going to explain a little bit about the history of the end of 1843, why there's a shift from the spring equinox and how they begin to shift to the 19th of April 1844, and the reasoning behind doing that. So he's going to explain a bit about the background. Pressure from opponents forced Miller's scholarly associates to study anew their position on or understanding of the Jewish year, and to probe deeply into its history. As a result, they were led to make the first correction in their calculation, which pertained to the exact time of the beginning and ending of the Jewish sacred year, extending from spring to spring. So all that passage is saying is this: William Miller had said that 1843 would end at the spring equinox. So this is 1843 and this is 1844. So this is just a reiteration of the point we've already made. And people begin to question it. Pressure begins to mount. And as a result of this pressure, the Millerites begin to investigate this subject. And they realize that William Miller has made a mistake. That it's not the spring equinox that marks the end of the year. And they're going to begin to make this shift. They begin to make this shift long before the end of the year. Right back here. It's not something they figured out as a last-ditch attempt to save themselves at the end of the year. They've understood this for quite some time. But because William Miller is so prominent in the movement, even though this is in the public domain, that it's almost certain that William Miller is incorrect about this date and that it needs to be shifted because of Karaite reckoning, people, because of the influence of William Miller, they still have this date in the back of their minds. As far back as April, and then in June and December of 1843, and in February of 1844, months before Miller's original date expired for the extending of the Jewish year 1843, at the time of the vernal equinox in 1844. Let me just simplify that if you didn't get that. It says as far back as April. So this is April 1843. This is right back here. As far back as April 1843. And then it says in June. And then it says in December. As far back as April, then in June and December of 1844. And then in February of 1844. So February of 1844 is going to be around here. This would be February 1844. Does everybody understand why that's 1844 and this is still being marked as 1843? Yeah? Everybody should be clear on that. It's not a mistake. It's because this is the spring of 1844. So 1844 technically begins back here. The reason why they highlight February is because of Samuel Snow's work. This is when Samuel Snow begins to come on the scene. After having studied all these points of truth, he begins to get involved here. In February 1844, months before Miller's original date expires, his date expires on the 21st of March 1844, months before this they begin to investigate this issue. His associates, people like Bliss, Litch, Himes, Southard, Apollos Hale, Nathan Whiting and others came to a definite conclusion. This was that the solution of Daniel's prophecy is dependent upon the ancient or original Jewish form of luni-solar time and not upon the altered modern rabbinical Jewish calendar. So I've already discussed this at length, that how they're going to go back to Karaite reckoning, not the Gregorian reckoning and not the rabbinical reckoning. They already understand this months before the end. They therefore began to shift from Miller's original date for the ending of the 2300 years at the equinox in March. They called it the vernal equinox or the spring equinox, over to the new moon in April 1844. Early in this period of investigation, a Signs of the Times editorial declared the following. So now he's going to quote from a periodical of this time, which is called the Signs of the Times. And I think the date for this, I don't know if they've given the date. I can't see it directly. June the 21st, 1843. So he's going to quote from this article from the Signs of the Times. Now there is a dispute between the rabbinical and the Karaite Jews as to the correct time of commencing the year. The former, which were the rabbinical Jews, are scattered all over the world and cannot observe the time of the ripening of that harvest in Judea. They therefore regulate the commencement of the year by astronomical calculations and commence with the first day of the new moon nearest the vernal equinox, when the sun is in Aries. If you don't understand the language, because it's quite difficult, I'm going to go through this again, but I'm going to explain it with this small graphic that I've done. So when I explain on the board how they calculate time, I'm just doing it I'm just repeating what we're just reading, but I'm not going to be using their language. If you're struggling with the language, just bear with it. The Karaite Jews, on the contrary, still adhere to the letter of the Mosaic law and commence with the new moon nearest the barley harvest in Judea. So all he's saying thus far is that the rabbinical Jews, what they do is they just do some astronomical calculations. And what they're going to look at the sun, and they're going to look at the moon. And they're going to see the relationship between these two to calculate the first day of the first month. This is what it's all about. And then it says that there's these Karaites who do it differently, and they're going to look at the sun and they're going to look at the moon, but now they're also going to look at the barley for the same purpose of deriving the first day of the first month. So you can see the differences, that this group are going to use the barley and this group don't. And this is the rabbis and this is the Karaites. This is Karaite reckoning and this is rabbinical reckoning. And they say, let me read this one bit more. It says, and commence with the new moon nearest the barley harvest in Judea, and which is 1 month later than the rabbinical year. So almost exclusively, which most of the time, they're going to begin their new year 1 month after the rabbis did. So the rabbis would begin it often in March, almost exclusively in March, and the Karaites would invariably begin it 1 month later in April. But you can't say that every single year. The vast majority of the time, they would be 1 month apart. So as soon as you know that, then if you ever heard the argument that in 1844, and there's plenty of arguments out there, if you go on the internet, if I don't recommend you do this, but if you went on these anti-Ellen White websites, one of the primary arguments they use against Ellen White, I don't know why they use it against Ellen White, because this is actually Millerite history, because it's a direct attack upon Adventism, and many anti-Ellen White websites are actually run by either Adventists or ex-Adventists. They're not even just Protestants, so they want to destroy the whole of Adventism anyway. But the argument is that it was actually September the 23rd, 1844, as opposed to October the 22nd, 1844. And it's all to do with how you start the year. And you can see that the Millerites understood that the Karaites almost invariably were a month later than the rabbis, and which is 1 month later than the rabbinical year. The Jewish year of AD 1843, as the Karaites reckon it, in accordance with the Mosaic law, therefore commenced this year with the new moon on the 29th of April. So if you're reading along with me and you read the 29th of April there, it's actually a mistake. I don't know how that mistake got introduced, but it's not a mistake in Froome's work. It goes right back to the original. I don't know if it's a mistake when they put the CD-ROM, the information onto the CD-ROM, because I haven't gone back to a photographic picture of the original article. But when you go through the calculations, when it says the 29th of April, it's talking about the 29th of April, 1843. It's talking about, if this is 1843, and we've got the 19th of April here, 1844, they say that this year began on the 29th of April, 1843. And if you go on the CD-ROM, that's actually what it says in this article, but it's actually a mistake. It's around the 1st of April that this year begins, not the 29th. There's a month out. I can't hear you, sorry. No, I think it's just a typo. They haven't made any mistake. The Millerites never made any mistakes in their calculation. I don't know how this mistake has crept in, but you know that the year 1843 doesn't begin on the 29th of April. It begins around the 1st of April, because this year has got 13 months in it. The only reason I mention that is because when you read it, I'm just pointing out, I'm not going into the intricacies of explaining about the structure of this year. I'm just pointing to the fact that I think it's a there's some kind of typo mistake, and I haven't gone back to the original to see how you do that. But there's a plethora of evidence to show you that it was actually the 1st of April, or it may have even been the 30th of March of 1843 when that year began. Because in this year you have to have 13 months, not 12 months. This is a leap year. And I'll explain a little bit about that as well. And the Jewish year, 1844, will commence with the new moon in next April, 18th and 19th, when 1843 and the 2300 days, according to the computation, will expire. So for those who are following on, reading with it, you can see it says the 18th and the 19th. Yeah? That's not some kind of general statement that they're making. Let me just explain this issue. I don't want to get bogged down with this. There are so many intricacies in this issue. Brother Lawrence, when he was describing how days work according to biblical reckoning, if this is the 18th and this is the 19th, right here, we know according to biblical reckoning, or the Bible, a day begins at the night time and it begins with night and ends in day. Yeah? And the way they saw this is they're going to superimpose this concept of how the Hebrews understood their days with the way we understand our day. And the reason why they're saying the 18th and 19th is because they're going to superimpose these Hebrew days with our days, because their day begins here at sunset and our day begins here at midnight. And because of this overlap, I'm not even going to try and explain it any better than this. All I'm just trying to say is, when you take Hebrew reckoning for how you calculate the beginning and ending of a day, it's different to us. Everybody understands that. And so the reason they're saying it's the 18th and the 19th is because the day actually begins in the evening of the 18th and ends in the day of the 19th. It begins in the evening of the 18th and ends in the day of the 19th. So according to what the Millerites would call civil reckoning, which is how you and I understand it, according to civil reckoning, they always fixed upon the 19th. They always fixed upon the 19th. So if I just said this to you now, when you go to October 22nd, 1844, this day actually begins in the evening of the 21st and extends to the evening of the 22nd of October, 1844. It doesn't, so when we talk about 22nd of October, it doesn't begin at midnight or, at midnight on the 22nd and ends at midnight at the end of that day, going into the 23rd. It actually begins at sunset on the 21st and ends at sunset on the 22nd. So that's why they're using this 18th and 19th. They're combining a biblical day with a Gregorian day. But according to the rabbinical Jews, it began with the new moon in the first of last April and will expire with the new moon in the month of next March. They consequently reckoned that the last day of the Jewish year, 1843, would close with the sunset of April 18th. So that's why they've got the 18th. It's the sunset of April 18th. Therefore, the first day of the first month, Nisan of 1844, true Jewish time, would have as its civil equivalent, there's this concept of civil, which is the day part that we're going to be looking at, of April the 19th, though beginning actually with the sunset of April 18th, it should thus read April 18th to 19th. So it's April the 18th to the 19th because it's from sunset to sunset. And Symes, writing after the spring equinox of 1844, declared that the real Jewish year, 1843, had not yet actually expired. So all that's saying is that after they'd reached the spring equinox on the 21st of March, there were some people who were disappointed. They'd said, oh, we've run out of time, the prophecies have already failed. But Symes, writing in an article after this date, says, no, don't worry, because the year doesn't end on the 21st of March, it actually ends on the 19th of April. So we've still got almost a month left. So he was trying to comfort the people, saying, this was a mistake that we were aware of for a long time, so don't worry. Which was the Jewish years of commencement, after its commencement, Miller gave it as his opinion that the Lord would come sometime between the 21st of March, 1843, and the 21st of March, 1844. So can you see why he's doing that? Because he's going from equinox to equinox, and he's got the 21st of March, 43, to the 21st of March, 44. That's all that's saying. This time has now passed by, and we are a few days beyond the time to which he believes the day might extend. Although the Jewish year has not expired, but extends to the new moon in April, as we explained in our last, yet our time will be regarded by the opponents as having passed by. So the mocking already starts to begin after the March date, because the opponent said, you said it was in March and nothing's happening, and now what we're trying to do is just fudge the date to get a little bit more time. But he's making the point that no, that's not true. We already knew about this a long time ago. So he's trying to comfort the people. The correction by the Millerites of the beginning of the Jewish sacred year was made deliberately and understandably on the basis of the original Mosaic stipulation to which their attention was directed by the early Karaite contention in behalf of beginning the true sacred year with the new moon of barley harvest in Judea, which usually fell in April. Hence I've put April. It usually falls in April, which is a month after the rabbis do theirs. This was the basis of their designation of October as the 7th month, true Jewish time, for the Jewish sacred year. So let's have a look at this little schematic that I've done here. And try and explain that. Does everybody understand what an equinox is before we move on? I'll take that as a no. I normally try and spend a little bit more time on this issue, but I'll try and do this quickly. If I do a little table here, and this is 1 year, so this is one solar year going from the beginning to the end. And I begin in the winter, and I end in the winter. And I'm going to begin it on the 21st of December, and I'm going to end on the 21st of December. And right in the middle would be the 21st of June. This is 1 year. So if I divide this year into quarters, this is 6 months, this would be 3 months, and this would be the 21st of March, and this would be the 21st of September. So I've just divided this year into 4 parts. Now, on the vertical scale, if we said that this height was just 1 day, and 1 day is 24 hours, so I'm going to split the day right in the middle here. And I'm going to say that this is 12 hours and this is 12 hours, hence 24 hours, and this is day and this is night. Okay? So I've got 1 year here, split into 4 parts, and on this vertical scale I've got 1 day. Now in winter, on the 21st of December, it's the shortest day of the year. Yeah? So if I said a day was only this, there was this many hours in a day, and there'd be this many hours at night, yeah? Because it's the longest night and the shortest day. And we'll get this point and bring it right over here, because that's December the 21st. And what is June 21st? June 21st is the longest day, so I put the June 21st date here, okay? And if I did a little graph of how many hours there are in a day, it would look something like this. So all that's showing is this, that if you go from the 21st of December here, as you start going through the year, the days start getting longer and longer, and the nights get shorter and shorter until you go to June, and then the nights start getting longer and the days start getting shorter until you get to the end of the year. Yeah? So if you look at March 21st and September 21st, this is when a day is exactly 12 hours and a night is exactly 12 hours. So the spring and autumnal equinoxes are when day equals night, and they're both 12 hours. And that's the definition of the spring equinox, when you've got night and day as being equal time. It might not be the technical astronomical definition, but that's a working definition of what it is. And the reason why it's important to understand that is because you know that the length of the days and the movement of the earth around the sun determine the seasons. So if you fix your year around the spring equinox, you know that you're now fixing your year according to a season. And you have to do that if you're working on an agricultural cycle. You have to fix your year according to a season. And we do the same thing, but we fix it according to the 1st of January. So our seasons are fixed within a day or so every year because of the way the Gregorian calendar works. And the Hebrews are going to do a similar thing. So when you go to the Hebrew calendation, I've already said that they look at the sun and the moon, and they also look at the barley. So we've just looked at the sun here, and we see that the first thing the Hebrews are going to do is they're going to look at the spring equinox, which is defined by this point here when you've got equal day and equal night, and you can calculate that very accurately. It's not difficult to do that. So you can predict year by year when that's going to happen, and it's almost around the 21st of March in our calendar at a fixed point. So what the Hebrews are going to do is this. They're going to look at the sun, and they're going to look at the vernal equinox or the spring equinox, and this is where they're going to start to calculate the beginning of their year. Then what they're going to do is, because they don't have a solar cycle, a solar calendar, what do they have? They have a lunar solar calendar. So now we have to take into account the moon. Remember 2 presentations ago I said that we don't use the moon to calculate our calendar. We just have a solar calendar. And in fact, our months are just arbitrary numbers. We just divided the year into 12 parts. But the Hebrews were not allowed to do that. They had to take their months and they had to be controlled by the cycle of the moon. So the next thing they would do is they would look at the spring equinox, and when they want to begin their year, and we're going to call the coding for the year the first day of the first month, they're going to look at this. They're going to look at the moon. And what I've done here, I've shown this is 1 year and this is another year. So this is year X and this is year Y. So if that's one moon cycle, we would have another moon cycle here, and we'd have another moon cycle here. So you can see how the moon is cycling through this year. And how long is this distance here? 29 and a half days, remember? Approximately. And so in another year, it would look like this and like this. So you can see how the moon travels through the sky through this year. One thing that you can see straight away is that in this year here, the relationship between the moon and the spring equinox is different than it is in this year. And this is the complication. This is when it starts getting complicated, when you're going to combine these two things together. This is why the Gregorian calendar ignores the cycle of the moon and takes a fixed point every year, which we call January the 1st as our new year. So the Hebrews aren't allowed to do that because the sun and the moon control their calendar and the seasons. So you can see in this year, this is the cycle of the moon as it relates to the spring equinox. And in this year, you can see it's different. And every year it will be totally different. It's never going to be the same. So that's one thing we need to consider. And the other thing is, I just want to look over here. This is another area of contention. You know that the moon, when you look at it, goes from a full moon where you can see a complete silver, and then it looks like this, and then it gets darker and darker until you get half a moon, and then it starts going the other way until you eventually get no moon or a dark moon. So everybody's familiar with that cycle. So we call this here, which I've drawn here, we call this a new moon. Or the other way of expressing it is called a conjunction. So the conjunction is when you get a particular relationship between the sun, the earth and the moon so that you can't see the moon at all. So the moon gets between the sun and the earth, and the moon is totally dark, you can't see it. And as soon as this occurs, then as you go through the next day and the days that follow, you're going to start seeing a small segment of the moon, and it will increase and increase, and you get back to this stage here. And as you begin to see this silver here, it's called the waxing crescent. It's waxing because it's getting bigger and bigger, and then when it gets to this point and it starts decreasing, this is called the waning crescent. So you get the waxing crescent on this side and the waning crescent on this side. So this is called the waxing crescent, and what the Hebrews are required to do is they look by sight for this first bit of silver. And as soon as they see the first bit of silver, this is the first day of the first month. This is how they calculate the beginning of their first month. They take the first sighting of the waxing crescent. So we've looked at the sun and we've begun to look at the moon. So the second stipulation is, which moon do we look at? Is it this moon or this moon for this particular year? So the second stipulation that they have is that they're going to calculate, or they're going to see, because they know when this is going to occur and they know when this is going to occur, they see which moon is closest to the spring equinox. Is it this one or this one? Now, if we just round this up to 30 days, for instance, and we said that this was 30 days, if this was 10 days, this would be 20 days. And in this example here, if this was 13 days, this would be 17 days. So in this year here, where would they begin their first of the first month? It's at the new moon, which I'm going to just use the new moon to talk about this. When they see the first waxing crescent, is it this moon or is it this moon? So the stipulation is that it's the moon that's closest to the vernal equinox or the spring equinox. So for this year, this is the one that they would choose, the first day of the first month. But in this year, it would be this moon here, because this is closest to the spring equinox than this one. So for this year, it would be the first day of the first month. So does that make sense? So what you can see is, in this year, it will be approximately the 11th of March. And in this year, it would be, what would that, the 3rd of April, is that correct? Approximately, I think it's the 3rd of April. So you can see that from year to year, you can have a wide variation where you begin your new year. Does that make sense? For us, it's always January the 1st, it's fixed. But for the Hebrews, they can have almost a month, because this could have been 14 days and this could have been 14 days, and the difference between them two is 28 days, which is almost a month. So their new year can vary by almost a month from one year to another. Can we see that? So in this example, you've got from the 11th of March to the 3rd of April, so there's quite a variation. The reason for that is this. If this is the sun, and this is the earth, and the earth is going to go round the sun, and this is where we start, it takes 365 days to go all the way round, doesn't it? It's actually 365 days and about 5 hours, about a quarter of a day. So that's going to take it all the way round. But the Hebrews are going to take their year, not as the earth that's going round. How do the Hebrews calculate their year? They have 12 months, and the months are going to be approximately 29 and a half days. So when you times 12 months times 29 and a half, you're going to be approximately 354 days, which is approximately 11 days short. Because what's a real year? 365. And 365 minus 354 is about 11 days, because it's not exactly that. So this is what we'll do. We'll start here, and the earth is going to go around the sun, and it's going to mark 1 month, 2, 3. And you're going to go all the way round, and you're going to come to the end of the year, and the earth is going to be here. And how many days short is that? 11 days. And so if you start your second year here, and you begin it all the way around again, you're going to end up here, and you're going to be another 11 days short. So you can see, after 1, 2, 3 years, how far are you going to be short? About 33 days. And 33 days is about 1 month. So you're going to quickly get into problems. You can see the problems because the moon and the sun, the relationship between the two isn't exact. And so if you're going to control your year by the cycle of the moon, you're going to be 11 days short approximately every single year. So the Jews have to compensate for that. Why do they have to compensate? Is because they need to control the beginning of their year, not just by the sun and the moon, but also by the barley harvest. And you don't have to be a farmer to realize that you can't harvest barley in winter. You're going to sow it in winter, but you're going to reap it in the spring or late spring. So what happens is if you don't take account of this discrepancy of you keep on losing time, you're going to get to a situation that when you want to get your new year beginning, because here it was 11 days short, and now it's 22 days short, and now it's 33 days short, you're going to get to the problem that when you get to the new year, you're not going to have any barley. And so you're going to break the biblical rule of offering a first fruit offering. So what they need to do is not only consider the sun, the 21st of March, and not only do they need to consider which moon is the closest to it, now what they have to consider is the barley going to be ready? Is the barley going to be ready? So let's look at that, how they do that. When is the barley supposed to be offered to the Lord? On the 16th day of the first month, which is approximately just over 2 weeks from the beginning of the new year. So in this calculation here, it would be 16 days after this, which would be the 27th of March. This would be the first fruit. Can everybody see that? You start on the 11th and you go 16 days. I actually think it's going to be the 26th. Because you're going to count 11th as the first. When you go the first, it'll get to the 26th. So in this year here, you need a barley harvest ready on the 26th of March. Yeah? But in this year, when do you need the barley ready to reach the 16th of the first? So I think it's going to be the 18th of April. When you count the third as the first. Someone can use their fingers and double check if that's correct or not. Yeah, 18th? It'll be the 18th or the 19th. I think it's going to be that. Because you're going to go 16 days forward. So can you see in this year here, you need the crops to be ready on the 26th of March. Because that's where you're going to reap some of them. And this one is going to be the 18th of April. So can you see there can be quite a big discrepancy between the two? So if this is Jerusalem, there's a field nearby, and all this field was ploughed and sown, and the barley began to grow way back here, somewhere back here. And what they're going to do is, they're going to look at this barley, and they don't need to harvest the whole crop. They're only going to harvest a select few. They only need a handful. And they're going to get this barley, and they're going to offer it as a wave offering to the Lord on the 16th. And so this is the first fruit that we're talking about here. So what they're going to do is this. They know when the new moons are going to happen because they can already calculate that. So they know approximately right back here. If you look here, you know that around the 11th of March, it's going to be approximately the first day of the first month. You don't know exactly until you get there and do a sighting, but you can calculate that. It's not difficult to do. But what you need to do is, you need to look at the barley back here. So they're going to look at the barley, and they're going to know that this is technically going to be the first of the first month, and that will be the 16th. And when they look at the barley here, they're going to see that the barley just looks like that. And these people are expert on observing barley. They have trained people doing this. So way back here, over a month before you even get to anywhere here, they're going to look at the barley. And they know that the barley, when it's at this stage here, in around 50, 60 days, by the time you get to here, they know that the barley will look like this. And they're going to say, if the barley looks like this here, by the time you get to here, the barley is going to look like that, and it's not ready. So they know way back here, because they've done this so many times, that when you get to the 26th of March, the barley won't be ready for the first fruit offering. So way back here, they're going to say that this year here, you can't begin it at this point here. So what they're going to do is they're going to add an extra leap month onto this year. Remember here with this slip in time, they'd got to a stage at this year where they're kind of either at this stage or this stage. And they say, we've slipped back time so much, we need to add an extra month. So they're not going to have 12 months this year. They're going to add an extra month, and then this won't be the first day of the first month. but this one will be. So now this is the first day of the first month, and then 16 days later, they know that if you give this barley an extra month, it's going to look like this, with the full ear, and this is fine.
So was the leap year based on the fact that they've accumulated so many extra 11 days, or the fact that they were still in the barley?
It's all based upon this, on observing the barley, but the reason why the barley isn't going to be ready at this time is because the cycle of the moon has shifted in relationship to the spring equinox because of this problem. Because you're going to get this slipping continually. So once you've added this whole extra month on, now you've gone really into the future. So next year, you almost certainly won't have to add an extra month in. But the second year might be a cold winter. It might be an extremely cold winter, so you may have to add an extra month in the second year. So on average, every 2 to 3 years, they would add an extra month in, whether it be 2 years or 3 years, and you can't calculate that. It has to be done, we read yesterday, it has to be done empirically, which means it has to be done by sight. Someone has to look at the barley way back here, and they're going to determine if it looks like this, it won't be ready in this example on the 26th of March, so they're going to add an extra whole month. But in this example, when they look at the barley back here, the barley kind of looks a bit like this. And they know if it looks like this, by the time you get to the 3rd of April and then the 18th of April, they know it's going to be totally fine and everything's going to be good. So in this case, then this here will definitely be the first of the first month, because they know from experience that the barley will be ready. So the point is, they're not checking the barley here, or here, or here. They're checking the barley at a very early stage, because they're going to get everything ready. Because you can't make all the necessary preparations, right hard up. You can't come to this date and say, oh, the barley doesn't look ready, let's just add an extra month on. It doesn't work like that. They're going to check it right back here, and they're looking at the barley and see what condition it's in, and that's what's going to determine whether or not they have an extra leap month or not. And remember, unlike us, if you want to add days onto a year, you can't just add part of a month on. So they can't add a few days on, they have to add a complete month, because their year is controlled by the cycle of the moon. So what I've explained here is what the spring equinox is. It's when you get equal hours of day and night, and this is what controls the seasons, because our seasons are controlled by the cycle of the sun. And then I've explained the relationship between the moon and the sun, that they would begin their new year with the moon that's closest to the vernal equinox, either this one for this year or this one for this year. And that's all the rabbis would do. They would just look at these two things that we've just said. So the rabbis would say, this is the first day of the first month, and this is the first day of the first month. But according to Scripture, on the 16th day of the first month, according to Leviticus chapter 23, you have to have a first fruit offering of barley. This barley had been planted way back here, and as you're approaching the end of the year, the barley looks like this. And if it looks like this, from years of experience, that if you selected this as the first of the first month, the barley won't be ready 16 days later. So you're going to add an extra month in, and in 16 days after this one, the barley will definitely be ready. So in this year here, this would be rabbinical time, and this would be Karaite time. So this is what the rabbis would say is the beginning of the year, and this is according to Karaite reckoning. And most of the time, the Karaites would be 1 month later than the rabbis. But in this year, This is the moon that's closest to the vernal equinox. So this would be rabbinical reckoning, but it would also be Karaite reckoning. Both of them would match up that year. So this is not a straightforward thing to understand. And what I want us also to remember is how the Jews established the first day of the first month. They don't use the new moon, but they use the waxing crescent, the first sliver. How much time have I got left? 10 minutes. So in the last 10 minutes, what I've got here is, it's not, hopefully it'll hook up onto here. It's just a rough diagram of the calendar for 1844. And what I've done here is I've got April, May, June, July, August, September, October, because they're the months that we need to grapple with. And in black, I've got the regular Gregorian calendar for the year 1844. This is only for 1844. So you can easily go onto Google and work out on April 1844 what the 1st of April would be, and you can show that it started on a Monday. So you can lay out the calendar of 1844 really simply. And what I've done in blue is I've superimposed upon this Gregorian calendar, which is in black. All these numbers here are in black. I've superimposed a Karaite calendar in blue on top of that. So I've already said that the Karaite calendar goes from 30, 29, 30, 29. If you go back and check how the Millerites calculated this year, what they did was, having established that this is the first day of the first month, the 19th of April, through this Karaite reckoning that we've just discussed, so they know that the first day of the first month here is the 19th of April. So you've got the 19th. What they did was they took the calculation and they said, how many months is it from April to October? And it's 6 months. So they did 29 and a half times 6, and that equals 177 days. And then they added 10 days onto that. They got 187 days. So all they needed to do was to start here and count 187 days. And if you count 187 days, it takes you all the way down here to the 22nd of October, 1844. And this is how they calculated that day. Having established that the 19th of April was the first day of the first month, back here, they got 29 and a half days times 6 months is 177 days. They added 10 days on because it's the 10th day of the 7th month. They got 187 days, and they established October 22nd, 1844. But what I've done for clarity is I've gone through a 30, 29, 30, 29 cycle. So this is the first day of the first month, and you can say it goes all the way to 30. And then I've started the second month here, I've circled it, the second month, and it goes all the way through from the 13th to the 14th, and it goes to 29 days. And here's the third month, and it goes all the way through 30 days, and here's the fourth month, and it goes all the way through to 29 days, and here's the fifth month, and then it goes all the way through 30 days to the sixth, and you get 29 days, then the first day of the 7th month, and when you get to the 10th of the 7th month, you get 22nd of October. So when you do the 30, 29, 30, 29, you get the same answer. But that's fine for the first day of the first month and the 10th day of the 7th month. But remember that we spoke about some other dates. So we have the first day of the first month, and we want to look also at the 5th day of the 4th month, We want to look at the first day of the 5th month, and we also want to look at the 10th day of the 7th month. We've discussed these two. We just want to look at these ones now. But in connection with the first day of the 5th month, we're also going to look at the 30th day of the 4th month. So all we need to do is, we'll go to the Millerite history, and we'll see Samuel Snow is instrumental in addressing the issue of the midnight cry. The Lord is using him, and what are the significant things that he does. So we know on the 21st of July, he preaches at the Boston Tabernacle, and this begins the public acceptance by the Millerite of his message. And as soon as he had done this presentation here, the Millerites began to understand that this was midnight. There's limited acceptance of what he's preaching, and then in the following month there's a camp meeting in Exeter which begins on the 12th and finishes on the 17th. And Samuel Snow arrives at the camp meeting on the 14th of August, and he preaches again on the 15th. Well, I've already read these statements to you. There are many more that you can read. And you can see here, if you look at the blue dates that are superimposed on the black, the blue is Karaite reckoning, and it's superimposed on the black, which is Gregorian. You can see, and the Millerites didn't recognize this, that this is the 5th day of the 4th month, because the 4th month begins here. So this is the 5th day of the 4th month. The Millerites understood this date here, the 15th. They understood this to be the midnight cry. But what they didn't recognize, as far as all the research that I've done, is that this was a fulfillment of the first day of the 5th month. And obviously they wouldn't have recognized that this had any prophetic significance, because there's no Bible verse that deals with this, which is the 30th day of the 4th month. But I'm going to explain why that's an important event. We can see its importance is because these 2 days are connected. There's a doubling of his message because this is the midnight cry. He arrives on a horse here at the Exeter camp meeting, and we understand the significance of him riding the horse. That prophetic explanation's already been given. But we want to take these dates and bring them over here, because you can see here that the 5th day of the 4th month is the fulfillment of this prophecy here, which Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 1, which is the prophecy of the wheels within wheels. And also the first day of the 5th month, you can see right here, is the Exeter camp meeting. And this is Ezra 7 verse 9. The reason why this is so profound, and I struggle because when I present this, I think I don't think I'm giving you I'm explaining the importance and significance of this thing. It is so beautiful to understand that the Millerites perfectly fulfilled to the very day so many different prophecies in this year, and they didn't even know it. And this truth has been hidden for 170 years, and it's only in the final generation, right at the right time, that the Lord's taken his hand away from and uncovered these truths, and we can see the profound beauty of how Christ is truly the Alpha and the Omega, that he's going to show us the end from the beginning. And we're going to see how the year 1844 and its literal fulfillment has such a profound significance to us at the end of the year, when we see the fulfillment of Ezekiel and Ezra here. And he's using the same book that the Millerites used, Ezra, that we need to understand. I'm not going to labour the point, but the connection between these two is the binding off period. And I think as it's been suggested already a number of times, we still don't even realise the full significance about the importance of this and what it means to us. But we're beginning to see, because this is the midnight cry for God's people today. And it's all was typified by Millerite history right here. The reason why, so I'm going to just drop this down because I've run out of space. This is where it begins to get a little bit complicated. You can see that we've used exclusively Karaite reckoning and Gregorian reckoning to calculate these dates or to observe how these dates all work. But we want to bring biblical reckoning back into this picture, because we've got the first day of the first month, and if we go to the 30th day of the fourth month, and we calculate the time between this event and this event, it's 120 days. And the way you calculate that is if we break this up, from the 1st of the 1st to the 30th of the 1st, and then the 1st of the 2nd to the 30th of the 2nd, and then the 1st of the 3rd to the 30th of the 3rd, and the 1st of the 4th to the 30th of the 4th, you get 30 days, 30, 30, and 30, which is 120 days. But it's also 4 months. And we would take this symbol, and this symbol. And all of these symbols or truths are derived from Ezra chapter 7 and the fulfillment of Ezra 7 in the year 1844 for the Millerites. And then hard up onto this date here, we would have the first day of the 5th month, which would take us to the 10th day of the 7th month. And if we break, we'd go from the first day of the 5th month to the 30th day of the 5th, to the 1st of the 6th, to the 30th of the 6th, to the 1st of the 7th, to the 10th of the 7th. And you would have 30 days, and 10 days. And this would be 70 days. This would be 1 month, 2 months, and this is part of the 3rd month. And so this would be the 3rd month. So you can see that you've got 3 months here as well. So again, from Ezra chapter 7, you have 3 more symbols or keys. So you have 6 keys or symbols which have helped open up the scriptures in a really profound and important way. And then, on top of that, we have the 5th day of the 4th month, which was July 21st, which connects Ezekiel with Ezra and gives us the binding off time period. So you can see that as Ezra 7 has been opened or begun to be opened, how the Bible has begun to open in such a profound way. And I hope it hasn't escaped your attention that when my brothers have spoken of the story of Joseph or Ruth or Esther, that the backbone of all of those studies is all of this information, because without an understanding of these dates and these time periods here, none of those truths could have been understood. None of those truths could. So all of those stories can only be understood once you have a clear understanding of Ezra. And to have an understanding of Ezra, you must be grounded on an understanding of how to calculate time at the beginning of our history, because it has significance at the end of our history. And so if you take all of this time period, it would lay out like this in a really nice and simple way. That you'd have 120 days, 70 days, and this would be the first of the first month and the 10th day of the 7th month, and here would meet the first day of the 5th and the 30th of the 4th. And all these 4 dates are the dates that were filled in Millerite history, plus the 5th day of the 4th month, which is the binding off period. Point. And all this truth here is all derived from Ezra chapter 7. Patrick yesterday he gave you a few Bible verses that dealt with the first of the first month, and I think also the number 120, and he began to show you, even though you may not have picked up on it, how you begin to use these symbols or keys to begin to unlock some of these Bible stories and these events, and how you can place them and bring them into our history. Because printed on top of all this, it shouldn't escape us that this is 9/11, this is the midnight cry, and this is the Sunday law. So this is just a brief overview of Ezra chapter 7. And what you would need to do is, obviously to begin to make application of this, is to search in the scriptures where you get the number 120, 70, the first of the 5th month, the first of the first month, first day of the 5th month, 3 months, and 4 months. And all of this, as I began right in my first presentation, is on top of our understanding of how you bring the everlasting gospel, the parable of the 10 virgins, the number 4, and the 7 thunders, and lay that all on top of this. And this is why we're saying that Ezekiel chapter 12 is being fulfilled. It's the word or effect of every vision that's now been opened up to God's people. Amen. Let's close with prayer. Heavenly Father, as we begin to see how you have enfolded in your word and in the fulfillment of that word through prophetic history, so many great truths that have been waiting to be discovered by those who are willing to dig deep and search for these hidden gems. But Father, we realize that this is not the work of man, that it's the Holy Spirit that is guiding your children into these truths. And you have everything in control because you allow these things to happen in your time. Father, may each of us feel the solemnity of this moment as we just scratch the surface of the book of Ezra. There are still so many gems and truths waiting to be discovered by people in this room who are willing to take the time and effort to open the word and to study for themselves. Father, it's my prayer that the short discourse that I've done on this subject over this week will inspire people to research and to study these things so that they may be firmly established upon the truths that are presented in your word. And also in the writings of our pioneers, our forefathers. Father, we know that they were not guided by the spirit of prophecy, but we know that holy angels were moving upon the minds of these men, directing and guiding them into these truths. Father, be with us at the end of the world. We know that we are inadequate and that we are weak and feeble. Please help us to not lean upon the arm of flesh, but to individually trust in your word and to look to you for assistance and help. Be with us and guide us through these sacred hours, we pray and ask in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.